Hello YouTube, this is Ezekiel doing a little tutorial video for my Combat Mission Victory Calculator version 2. If you have used version 1 in the past, this is the updated little system, and also fixed a couple of bugs that were picked up by different users over the years. Very minor ones, I think, or ones you could easily get around. Anyway, so I'll replace the old video with the new video, which I'm recording now. And it'll basically just run through for the basic Excel user how to use it. So the whole purpose of this little tool is basically there for scenario designers to design up victory point allocations they want to use in their draft scenarios, and basically play around then with what points scored the player can or can achieve, basically so they can really test out to see if the result of, say, taking that terrain objective does lead to the end result that they intended when the player gets to the after action screen. This is even more important though for campaign designers, where you need to ensure that a certain threshold in terms of victory level is achieved to determine when a player will go down different pathways of a campaign. That last bit was exactly why I built something like this just for me, was when I was doing my Lions of Kapiki campaign a few years ago. So this is the updated little suite. If you haven't used the old tool, don't worry about it. I'll do it all from scratch here. Okay, so the first thing you do is basically you've got blue force and red force. Doesn't really matter, but I mean Allies, Axis maybe, or for the modern titles, blue and red force, pretty self-explanatory. So you've basically got your terrain, unit objectives, and your parameter objectives. Now these are fixed by Battlefront. Anyone who's used the editor or played enough scenarios will know sometimes they're used, sometimes they're not. Different scenario designers have their certain preferences. Terrain objectives, you've got your occupy, destroy, preserve, touch, and exit. And unit objectives, you've got destroy, destroy all, and spot. So I won't explain what all they are. If you don't know what they are, head back to your manuals or go look at John S.'s excellent scenario design manual, and that should explain it all for you. So let's pretend we've got a little scenario here. We've got, say, 3 occupy objectives. For both sides. Okay, so we lay in 3 there, and let's say I'm going to have a destroy objective on, let's say, the enemy HQ unit. So all I've got to do is basically list those in, as well as a title that I'm going to use in my actual scenario. So let's say they're going to take the church as their objective. Town centre, and let's say, no, not really town hall, is it? So let's say the warehouse. Okay, so I've set it up so let's say this is the Allied force. The blue force has to move in, occupy a church, occupy the town centre, and occupy the warehouse, and if they can also destroy the enemy HQ unit, they'll get some points. These other objectives which I'm not using in my scenario, just leave those blank, no issue at all. Now let's say on the red force, they've got to have some victory points allocations as well. So let's say that we have the same. It's really more of a meeting engagement scenario actually, but okay. It doesn't really matter. This bit is more for you so you can save a copy of it and then have it on file for reference. The key bit is these shaded cells here. That's when it really starts to work its little bit of magic. So you'll notice all this here all does some behind the scenes wizardry, and then you'll see based on the points you're allocating into these boxes, you'll see these will actually show up eventually with a victory level. So the assigned points, these are the points that you as a scenario designer are assigning to that objective. The maximum amount of points the player can achieve. So basically, let's say the church is the main objective. Let's say it's worth 500. And let's say the other ones here are only worth, say, 200 each. They're minor terrain objectives. And let's say the enemy HQ, they will give the player a bonus 100 points. So 1,000 victory points are up for grabs for the Allied force. Let's keep it simple. On the Axis side, we'll say it's exactly the same thing. So 1,000 points each, exactly the same. Very, very simple meeting engagement. Okay, so that's what it basically is. The point score, this is where really the testing comes in. So you'll see those black boxes disappear because at the moment, assuming that both players, or the player and the AI, didn't actually score any points at all, so it would assume it's a draw automatically. These will auto-update every time you add some points in. So let's assume you want to test what happens if the Allied player takes all the objectives. Okay. And then manages to knock off the enemy HQ. And let's say the Axis side, that's the AI or the opponent, only manages to hold, actually that wouldn't be possible. So let's do simple, there we go. So there you go. So obviously all the 1,000 points to 0, total victory for the blue force, total defeat for the red force, or Axis. So this is where it's really easy to play around. Rather than going back into your scenario, changing some point values and then testing it yourself, which takes an awful lot of time, you can now just quickly edit these values and see what would happen. So I can play around like that. That means the Allies didn't hold this. So let's say in this scenario, the church is taken, but the defenders or the Axis force have managed to hang on to the 2 minor terrain objectives. It would switch over from a total victory before to a minor victory. Let's say we want to, what happens if he does take out the Allied HQ? It would then go down to a draw because you've got a split there of only 100 points. The way Combat Mission does its victory levels is basically means it would just be a draw. That is essentially what the purpose of this tool is for you as a scenario designer to simply play around and get the point allocations just right. It also allows you to test out what would happen if scenarios have different objectives. So both sides have different objectives to achieve in the same scenario. So let's keep the Allies the same. Let's put all that back to 0 for a second. Okay, and let's say the Axis force has to do something different. Let's say they really want to prioritise the church. We'll bump that up to 600. Okay. Let's say they don't have any minor objectives. So the Axis force in this case are only worried about the church as a key terrain objective, but they are looking to basically cause the enemy casualties to be, let's say, I don't know, 50% casualties, okay? And let's say they want to assign another 600 points to that. So as you can see here, all the Axis have to worry about is defending that church and causing as much chaos as possible. So actually that wouldn't be right, that'd be the wrong type of objective. I'm thinking unit objective. So they just cause damage and hold the church. You can also see in this situation the point allocations are different, which Combat Mission does allow you to do in the editor. So it also gets a bit harder to test out outside the game. So what you can do here, you can then play around the same deal. Let's say the Allies didn't take the church, but they did take 2 of their minor objectives. Didn't take out the enemy HQ though, he's probably in the church. So the Axis held on to the church. And let's say enemy casualties, let's say they did actually cause around half casualties. Okay, so you know then that in this case, the Axis force have achieved 900 points of their total 1,200 that they can achieve, while the Allies have only done, say, 400 out of the 1,000 they can achieve. This would cause a tactical victory for the Axis force and a tactical defeat for the Allied force if this was the makeup of how the game looked at the end of when a ceasefire was called or the battle ended. So, and then you can just play around. Let's say they did knocked off a few more Allied troops. It would still be a tactical, but you can then play around and see when it would bump up to a major victory or major defeat. So it's about 450-ish. They will switch over to a major victory, or the degree of victory will be a lot higher. that is basically the tool in a nutshell. I will put a link in the description below. As always, if you do see any further bugs or errors, let me know, and I'll get around to updating it when I have some time. The joys of Christmas at the moment when I did this. But yeah, hopefully you enjoy that tool, and hopefully encourages a few more people to get a bit creative with their scenario design, and I'll see you all real soon. Take it easy, everybody.